Lucian now, right now. What we thought. Well, see this got Can you hear us?
Hello? Can you all hear me?
Hey. Can you hear us? Sake. I don't know, man. You said you tested this. Okay. No, it's worked before. Right. And it doesn't work on yours, I didn't test it. Hold on. Right. Can you hear us?
Hello, I can hear you a bit. Can you hear me?
Yeah, there's an echo there.
There's an echo if I listen to you. So can you type to communicate to me to tell me that you can hear me okay? Please? There's no point trying to talk to me. Okay. That's fine, is it, at this kind of volume? Okay. Brill. Right, hello everyone. I can't really see even how many of you are there, but it's funny to talk to you from Liverpool. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, wow. Okay. Hello. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen to show you some browser windows. I'm going to talk about the beginning of all this stuff. Back at the... yeah, that's working. Back in 2003, a friend of mine really wanted to know how his MP voted, and still in the UK, the only way of doing it is to use the site we know, which you've probably heard of, which is called They Work For You. And if I put in my postcode, I can still now see my MP in Liverpool, Louise Ellman, and get a quick summary of how she voted and find out that she was for the smoking ban and was very strongly for invading Iraq. And it's particularly, the important thing is we've made lots of code, we've gathered data from the Parliament website, but it's made it very simple, made it down to these simple phrases. And that accessibility is something that's only really available now with computers, with the internet. The whole world of publishing, the way everything has changed quite a lot. In Ireland, you've tried to make similar sites, and as I understand, you've got data problems at the moment. This is John Handler. He keeps building these sites now, which is fantastic. And what I want to, as well as talking about the past, I want to mention the future for each of the three sites I'm going to go for. So the problems that Kildare Street has, I'm sure, will be temporary, and that the Irish government and activists will sort it out and manage to create better parliamentary information for Ireland. But in the real future, everywhere in the world should have all data that's about democracy, all data about what MPs do, all of their speeches, everything they say in the representation of people, should all be clearly published in an easy way. And Puppet is a project that's heading in that direction, which is a tool, not a website for end users, but a tool made by My Society, which helps people in any country set up the core database of members of parliament or of otherwise and important organisations. So that's called Puppet. And what I want to see in the end is all the, as I say, every country in the world publishing by default all of this core democracy data about what state a bill is at in real time, so that people can easily get alerts next week, and they can search for things that they're interested in. They can track the stuff they care about. And the reason that matters is partly democracy, it's partly making full use of the internet. It's mainly empowerment and better communication between MPs and the public. And I think it will happen. And it's one of those things where it's better to embrace it and make it happen now. Fix My Street, you've probably heard of because you've got a pretty good version in Ireland, again, made by John Handler. I'd like to see more reports on it. I'm not sure what areas it covers, but maybe you can tell me in the questions. Fix My Street came about because Tom Steinberg, who's the founder of My Society, another friend of mine, because he wanted to report a broken telephone box, and he had no idea how to do it. He walked past it in the street every day, and he didn't know who to tell that the phone box was broken. So he had the idea that it ought to be user-centric, that the user ought to be able to report the problem as they see it, and it gets sucked into the right part of government without them having to know which city council to report it to, without them having to carefully describe where the location is, because they'll have a nice map to report it on. And nowadays, I think the endpoint of Fix My Street is much more than just a simple user interface on mobile phones and for reporting potholes. The future of Fix My Street is that every single system within local government becomes an API. So whether you want to preserve a tree or make a planning application, whatever you want to do, keep track of the budget, everything happening within government can be done as a platform. And this is the kind of thing that GDS, the Government Data Services, is doing in national government in the UK. And it's really My Society that's pioneering that work in local government. And there's a protocol, a computer protocol, a bit like the web is based on protocols. And the nice thing about protocols is once you have them, you get much more collaboration than you do with just one organization controlling everything. And Open 311 is a protocol for reporting bugs. This is a really good blog post that My Society just posted, which if you look on their blog at the moment, there's a post with cartoons, so it's much more fun to read. Open 311 explained. You see, cartoons, brilliant. And it explains fully how this works, what this protocol is. But basically it lets any of the pieces of software that councils use to maintain their street repair databases, lets them interact with any user interface that reports things. And it goes more broadly than that. So what I want to see in another 5 years' time is everything about the workings of local government being visible in that way, so that councillors can keep track of it, so that individuals can see if reports have already been made, and so it feels engaged, so people feel like they're being responded to. I'm just going to check that thing out. So the next one I'm going to go is onto the subject of freedom of information. Many countries in the world now have an FOI request law, and we made a website, which, again, there was this pain that actually I had to, when I made freedom of information requests, I often didn't understand the responses myself, and I had to share them with people I knew who might be better at law or know more about the thing that I was researching. And I would have to upload the documents that had been emailed and put them on my own website. And so I had the idea of making, and at My Society, we made this website, What Do They Know? That helps you make freedom of information requests and see what's inside them. So this one is about unused property at Roehampton University, which 3 hours ago they gave a successful answer to, which is this document here. And we've now got, there are hundreds of thousands of requests in What Do They Know now. Now, the brilliant thing that My Society have been doing recently, I should say that I don't actually work at My Society anymore. I still hang out with them and track what they're doing. I run a startup called ScraperWiki now. But the people at My Society have been generalizing What Do They Know, and they've made this thing called Alivatelli, which you've probably heard of. Martin's probably mentioned it to you, because I know he's working in this area to try and get an Irish version gone. And using the same code that powers What Do They Know, that lets people in the UK keep track of 146,000 FOI requests. The same software is now used in lots of countries all over the world, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in Hungary, in Spain, in Albania, in the EU. It's like an extraordinary variety of places in Brazil. And they're all using the same software now and contributing back to it and making it better and better. And really, though, what I want to see in the end with Alivatelli is for there to be no need for it. Ideally, every government would just naturally publish everything it does online automatically and in a straightforward way. Now, that they don't is a mere accident of history. It's simply because when computers came into existence, governments were already built up all these systems based on paper. If you start from scratch, as say Estonia had the luxury of doing, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Estonia started from scratch, and they have an amazing information infrastructure with all sorts of rules, like every meeting between public officials has to have its minutes published online within 30 minutes of the meeting ending. There's none of this make an FOI request and wait 28 days. So again, the really big picture here is that the fundamental structure of government should be altered. So it simply just all happens in public, much like open source developers do their software development in public. There's no reason why most of the business of government shouldn't just happen in that way anyway. So that's what I'd like to see. Going back to where I started, the reason we made these websites in the first place was partly to help our own pains, that we wanted to find out how our MP voted, that we wanted to report a broken phone box, that we wanted to share our freedom of information requests with people. But really, the actual ultimate benefit was that it explained to people what we meant, how we thought government could be so much better. The relationship between people and government could be much more interactive, much more dynamic, based on you doing real work together, improving the world together, rather than based on a sort of more confrontational relationship that often happened in the past, or a relationship just based on elections every 5 years. And that kind of civic activism, as it's called, civic hacktivism, excuse me, use tiny writing, civic hacktivism. There's this thing called Agitpropagogo, which is an unfinished website by Tony Bowden, who works in Eastern Europe, organising lots of My Society projects. He calls it a civic hacktivism ABCDeary. If you search for agitagogo.com. And it's fantastic sort of summary as to the kinds of principles we used when we were making these sites. And I think there are probably lots of other things that no one's done yet, or that people have done and I haven't heard of yet, that can use the same principles to, with relatively little resources, show the way forwards. So I would encourage you to have a look at it and see if you can get inspiration and anything that you can help shine a light as to how the future could be much better than it is already. Okay, thank you. It's funny not being able to hear you, so I don't know, don't know what's happening. Do we have questions? You might have to type them in. Oh, I forgot to show you Agitagogo. One sec. I didn't realise I wasn't sharing when I showed it. Let me do that now. This is Agitpropagogo, and the URL is agitagogo.com, agitagogo.com. I think if you search for civic hacktivism on Google, if you're lucky, it's going to be the first hit. Yeah. So if you search for civic hacktivism, then you'll find it. I'm going to use this as oh, got a question. Is that between citizens and government? Yeah. So, yeah, that's a very good question, because after 10 years, you think it would be clear. And in a way, the trouble is the impact gets absorbed in this very subtle way. It gets spread diffusely. So there are millions of people every year who use They Work For You. And they all have been leveled up. They all have a higher expectation of the information you can get. And you sometimes find like concrete, tangible examples where people, rather than just slandering an MP, will actually quote their actual voting record. And you see that in election leaflets. We see it in newspaper articles. But most of the time, that kind of effect is very subtle. So yeah, I definitely think it's altered expectations internationally. It's had a very large effect on other countries wanting to do the same thing, such as the Sunlight Foundation starting in the US and like the projects that you have in Ireland. And it's definitely had an effect in terms of what people expect. What we had hoped is we would find a project which really made like a 10 times difference, which fundamentally altered the political organization. And no one's found that yet. I think it is still there, it's slightly harder to make. Perhaps something that helps the formation of policy that's like a combination in a clever way of a wiki and a forum and bubbles up policies. And lots of people have tried to do this, but no one's really succeeded. But the things that we've done, I would say they've like added a 10% improvement to the quality of the relationship between people and government. In particular, so that's more for they work for you. For things like Fix My Street, the impact is much more long term. The real impact is as government gradually gets reformed. So what GDS, the Government Data Service, is starting to do in the UK now, in the Cabinet Office, they've sort of tackled the main government website, www.gov.uk, and now they're working on the transactional things. So how you file your income tax, how you get your car tax disc, how you, all sorts of things, how you report that someone's died, all sorts of government processes that can be made better. And the real win will be when the whole of government just thinks in this way. How can we maximally use computers, smartphones, the internet to make it as easy as possible, as friction-free, as usable for people to do these tedious things they don't actually like doing. So, and that does take time to bed in. So in that sense, I expect a very large impact, like several decades later from when we started doing it. How many team of hackers? One. Minimum of one. That's John Handler. He started various websites basically by himself. You can do much better if you have a variety of people with the right skills. So, and you work harder. So in terms of coders, having a couple of people can be ideal because you can iterate around more. You will need people to help you maintain it, even in terms of doing customer support, or as John's just saying to me in the chat, so that you can add the public bodies to it. But you can always do less. I mean, an Alivatelli instance would work with just the central government authorities, and that wouldn't need a big volunteer team to maintain. But if you get the volunteers and you nurture them as you launch the site, you can find other people to help you. And then, in the case of Alivatelli, they'd come along and added thousands of public bodies to it. Yeah, so the same thing applies to publicity, fundraising. It's much better to employ people. The My Society sites, we managed to do a lot more of them, and they're a lot better quality since we managed to get funding and commercial work to fund it in various ways as a full charity. But even before you do anything, you can, especially now there's the tools like open source code bases you can use. It's relatively cheap to launch them. Maintaining them is a whole other matter. Yeah. Any more questions? I don't know if anyone can see, guys can see the chat, but John's saying he can maintain Kildare Street and Fix My Street by himself, but he thinks what do they know is another matter. I think what do they know is lucky it has lots of volunteers. I don't think it fundamentally needs more. I think They Work For You and Fix My Street could also benefit from lots more volunteers. And I don't know how many it has in the last year or two, but we didn't have many to start with. So if there were lots of volunteers on Kildare Street or They Work For You, would do a lot more work curating voting records and adding curated content and clean English explanations and having people marking up bills. If you had a lot more volunteers on Fix My Street, you would have people going out playing games to mark up whether things have been fixed or not, things like that. I've got another question arriving. Oh. In universities, the main thing that makes me think of is that naturally students do use them more. Certainly a few years ago, before when not very many of the public were online and disproportionately many students used the internet, there was the general election in, let me think which one I'm thinking of, 2005 in the UK. So this was a couple of years into us doing this stuff. Noticeably, there were several university cities that swung between two of the parties. It was actually from Labour to Lib Dem. And we're fairly sure that a large part of that was because people could more easily look up the Labour Party's record on invading Iraq and on civil liberties particularly. And on tuition fees, ironically, given politics in the UK now. But in 2005, the Labour Party looked bad on those issues, on foreign policy, civil liberties, tuition fees. And They Work For You made that very visible. And noticeably, several student towns swung. And we saw our stuff in election leaflets and things at that time. So to an extent, I think they probably are using it. whether there's a particular tip. One of the things I'm hoping will happen, no one's done yet, not in the way, at least not in the way I expected, is better use of social media, and particularly social media that I don't use because I'm too old. Whether there'll be like someone using BlackBerry messaging or someone using a part of Facebook in a way that I don't use it to really alter politics, and I'm expecting some young people to do that at some point. It hasn't happened in a way that I know about yet. There are a few things, but they tend to be not directly about the kind of core democracy stuff. They tend to be about fundraising and things like that instead. John's got something he's saying as well, but do feel free to get another question and queue it up. I think you're probably all glad I'm not there because I've got a cold. So sorry that I'm a bit croaky sounding. Oh, that's a great question from John. He says in the chat, FOI fees. Gavin in Dublin is, and I agree, in favour of starting an LTLE that only covers EIR because of fees. Okay, so and do you think that's a good idea? I'm going to assume the question is, do I think that's a good idea? I think it's a terrible idea. I think what you should do is start an FOI site that just asks for the responses and says, no, has a preamble on each request saying, you might try to charge me fees. No other country does this. All these other sensible countries don't charge fees. If you want to charge me fees, you can, but it'll look really embarrassing. And we'll count up how many times you do it, and we'll also count up how much money you've wasted by people repeating requests because of the same thing. So, yeah, I would be quite aggressive. I would aggressively use it to aggressively campaign. I bet you that a substantial proportion of authorities will answer anyway. That's one strategy. The other strategy I would use is take the fees, which I know is a pain and probably too much effort to do, too hard to do for volunteers. But one of the cute things, they've done it in America with Mudlark. They take fees, and it's got some advantages. If you have to pay, then it's better that when you've paid, your request is shared. So it's like I wouldn't let the best be the enemy of the good. You can make an incremental improvement for people who are currently making FOI requests in Ireland by having a pool where they share all their labour. And that I think would be worth doing as well. So I'd still go for it and go for one of those two approaches. By getting the impression the lobbying to change the law approach hasn't worked. Thank you. Okay, take care. Bye, everyone.
All right, okay. All right, cool. Guys, it's pizza is on the way, but feel free to help yourself with refreshments, please. And first, my shop, talking between yourselves if you can, please. Not with my shop, but with you.